And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Tuesday morning's flying weather again showing a lot of IFR out here covering the Bering Sea right up toward the southwest coast, up to St. Lawrence Island, down to the Aleutians, and in a narrow band of IFR through the Bering Strait there in the western Seward Peninsula, catching Cape Lisburne and Point Hope. More IFR, North Slope in the Arctic coast, and yet another band of IFR, Prince William Sound, right on down and along the southeast coast. And for the afternoon, this area shrinks, just leaving the panhandle behind with marginal VFR, and good marginal VFR up over the eastern interior, covering much of the Yukon River here, and then southward to the Alaska Range and Kuskokwim Valley into Bristol Bay, but becoming VFR, Kodiak Island, western Cook Inlet, and into the western Susitna Valley. Even more VFR out here over the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, northward to the Noatak Valley, and even the western Arctic coast around Point Lay. IFR holding here at go westward and right along the Yukon Delta coast. And then for Wednesday morning, that area pushes inland into the, across Norton Sound there, right up to Norton Bay, southward across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, and down to the north side of the Alaska Peninsula, still covering the Aleutians and extending northward here along the western Arctic coast, kind of up and then down over the eastern Arctic coast with VFR south of the Brooks Range. So marginal VFR, Alaska Range here up into the Tanana Valley, White Mountain areas, possibly as far north as Eagle, and then the eastern Copper River Basin. And this area of IFR in the North Gulf Coast continues to shrink. And then for the afternoon, that area is gone, leaving behind marginal VFR here for the North Gulf Coast. Still pretty marginal for the Panhandle and over toward the eastern border here, especially along the Yukon River up in toward the Eagle area. Good VFR, interior Alaska, right on down now. Prince William Sound becoming VFR westward into the Kuskokwim Valley. Marginal VFR slipping up to southwest Kodiak Island. And still a lot of IFR there for the western Arctic coast, right through the Bering Strait, covering just about all the Aleutians and Bering Sea. Passes Anatuvik and Adigan look on the marginal side for Tuesday. And for the Lake Clark and Merrill passes, marginal VFR as well. Rainy, marginal VFR. And windy looking pretty marginal as well. Isabel and Mentesta affect the entire Alaska Range. We'll see occasional marginal VFR throughout the day tomorrow. Some areas mostly marginal. Tanita also looking pretty marginal. Portage, marginal. Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR. Freezing levels here, upper level low and cool pool of air associated with it. 4,000 feet here, right over the western Alaska Range. Otherwise, 6,000 falling back to 2,000 feet for the western Arctic coast. And freezing levels ranging 8 to 12,000 feet over the southeast coast and 8 to 12,000 feet here over the southern Bering Sea to the Aleutians. Icing, next batch here sliding eastward, probably won't reach the Pribilof Islands until tomorrow evening, staying north of the Aleutians though. And then some possible considerable moderate icing here, Yukon River into the central interior areas, and another batch there right around the greater Yakutat area. And at this elevation at 33,000 feet, jet stream winds south-southwest, 100 knots right into the southeast coast. And then a lot of north-northwesterlies here, high pressure starting to develop over the northern Bering Sea at this elevation. So northerlies 65 knots across the Seward Peninsula, northwest-southwest coast picking up to 85 knots across the Alaska Peninsula, and northwest 80 knots back out over the western Bering Sea. 9,000 feet, northwest winds 40 to 45 knots there from the Seward Peninsula down across the Alaska Peninsula area, and more west-northwest out over the western Aleutians. Upper level low here tracking eastward along the North Gulf Coast. That puts southwest flow at about 35 knots into the Panhandle. And at 3,000 feet, low pressure again near Cape St. Elias there. So Southwest winds not all that strong, not all that brisk there for the Panhandle, but definitely stronger through Kamishak Gap and the Barren Islands, about 40 knots there, 45 knots blowing across the Aleutian Range, and then lighter back up to the north and northwest. High pressure light winds over the Aleutians. Turbulence, considerable moderate turbulence, pretty fair bed here, Shelikof Strait, southwest Kodiak Island, the Alaska Peninsula, as well as Togiak Bay and Cape Newnam into the Auckland Mountains.